Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Harding. It's kind of an odd place that we've been put in here as far as a subcommittee, but I'll try to make this as direct as I possibly can. Here again, my name is Mark Harding. I'm a citizen of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Also a member of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe and lived half my life in Aquina, which is on the western end of Martha's Vineyard. The former Indian lands conveyed to members of the Wampanoag tribe and the lots severed from the common lands in the former Indian district of Gay Head were granted to newly acknowledged citizens of the Commonwealth. The legislature specifically demanded that all Indians shall hereafter have the same rights as other citizens to take, hold, convey, and transmit real estate, which was under the chapters 463 of the Acts of 1869. Our family were originally allotted those plots of land in 1870. And because of this prolonged fight that we've had to deal with, we have been forced to sell some of our birthright. This fight to use our land began over 30 years ago when my grandmother, Eleanor Pocknett Harding, Princess Bluefeather of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, was confronted with the issues of not having access to her family's properties. She was the wife of the late Chief Whitefeather, Charles Harding of the Herring Pond Wampanoag tribe. She is also the great-granddaughter of the Reverend Blind Joe Amos, the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe's first celebrated Indian preacher, who is buried on Chappaquiddick Island. She started her married life on Martha's Vineyard, where she and Charles were caretakers of the celebrated Pickney Mouse Farm on Chappaquiddick. Before departing the farm in 1930, my grandfather asked his cousin Ralph Harding to visit, and he remained as the caretaker of the Pickney Mouse Farm for over 60 years, becoming a valued member of the Chappaquiddick community. My grandmother raised her family in the village of Borndale along the river from the Great Herring Pond, where the Harding family homestead was established decades before. Many of the Herring Pond Wampanoag Indian lands surrounding her property were grabbed and stolen by the town of Plymouth through tax takings and land court bandits. My grandmother also spent many memorable times with her cousins, Sarah Adequin, and friends at the farmhouse and summer cottages she ended up owning under the Gay Head Lighthouse. My grandmother was a revered elder of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe who tended and cared for her family lands in Aquina and other areas after they were conveyed to her from Edmund Cooper's direct relatives in the 1970s. Mr. Cooper was an Aquina Wampanoag, and he was also a longtime selectman who was responsible and instrumental in procuring electricity and telephone service to the town in the middle of the 20th century. Since the Kittrus action began over 30 years ago, we've lost my grandmother, Eleanor, her daughters, Eleanor Jr. and Sheila, her sons, Lansing Pocknett and Charles, and just this past January, my father, 91 years old, left us. We've lost many elders fighting for this justice and losing our land at the same time. The SJC declared that in Kittrus that easement rights were inalienable and that Indians did not have the same rights as other citizens, contrary to the express language in Chapter 463 of the Acts of 1869. The town raised the value of our land to over $1.2 million per lot prior to Kittrus, and we still cannot access our land. The valuation was based on the lands being fully accessible, which they assumed based on prior land court decisions, with a tax rate of over $8,000 per year per lot. Our family had 4 such lots. Eventually, we had to sell some of these holdings to wealthier folks who can afford the taxes, or they could have been protected as conservation lands to create open space around more wealthier folks. Just recently, we were able to have the tax value corrected on some of these parcels, but the back taxes remain, exceeding over $100,000. I'm pretty sure that that's an impact that was never expressly considered by the SJC or the legislature. I would, however, respectfully request that you move House Bill number 3599 to alleviate any burden on us as original lot owners to have to pay for easements to which they should be automatically entitled to under the intent of the general courts expressed in 1869 and 1870. The reality of the situation is that the towns and the courts have eliminated bedrock easements rights that have existed for centuries and by the legislature for over 150 years. Who said taking of Indian lands is complete in the United States? Obviously, nobody that's asked us. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mark and Chairman Gabali, members of the committee. My name's James Decoulos. I'm a civil engineer. I've represented the Wampanoag tribe of Aquinnah. I lived on the vineyard in the 80s and early 90s, and my wife and I bought some land down there. We were the ones who pressed a case all the way to the SJC. It's under my wife's name, Maria Ketras. This is fundamentally a case of the haves versus the have-nots. This is a case about property that's been landlocked as a result of development in 5 main Indian districts in the Commonwealth: Mashpee, Aquinnah, the Herring Pond tribe in Plymouth, Chappaquiddick, and Webster. It was around this time, around the late 19th century, shortly after the Civil War, when the Commonwealth of Massachusetts said, we also need to take care of Native Americans. And the legislature commissioned the editor of the Worcester Telegram Gazette, his name was John Milton Earl, to prepare a report on the Native Americans at that time. And he was the one who determined these 5 primary districts where Native Americans continued to remain. And as Mark said, Earl's effort led to this legislation, which was enabled 4 years after the Civil War, Chapter 463 of the Acts of 1869. All of the information about this bill has been compiled on a website appropriately named IndianEasements.com. So I encourage you to view the website. Mark and I have also going to be submitting written testimony. But if you go to IndianEasements.com, you'll get a sense of the history of why the legislature decided that the Native Americans were due the same rights as African Americans. And it was around shortly a year or two after that the legislature also said, we would like each one of these 5 districts, the Indian residents and the other occupants of these 5 districts, we would like to give them the same rights as other citizens of the Commonwealth. And so what they did was, in Chappaquiddick, they ended up merging it with the town of Edgartown, and Gay Head, which is now known as Aquinnah, the historic native name of Gay Head, they decided to create a new town. In Mashpee, that was formerly a district, Mark, right? I think they created the town of Mashpee around that same time. The Herring Pond tribe in Plymouth ended up merging with the town of Plymouth. Webster ended up, the Webster Indians ended up merging with Webster. But what happened was land was severed. These huge districts were severed. In Gay Head's, Aquinnah's instance, there was 2,700 acres. The land was all cut up. And the commissioners who cut the land up didn't reserve any easements to all the lots. And in Aquinnah's situation, there were over 700 lots that were created. Now, if anyone's gone to law school, one of the first courses you take in property law, or one of the first things you learn in property law about easements is that there are what they call implied easements. And for over 100 years, the land court has said all of these lands in Aquinnah are entitled to what they refer to as easements by necessity. That means that when these lots were cut up in 1878 in Aquinnah, they were all entitled to easements to get to the property. And what the SJC said in our case, the Ketras case in 2016 was, well, we think these lots are valid, they were created for the Indians, but you can't, these easement rights aren't alienable. they can't be conveyed to other people, which is completely opposite of what easements by necessity are. So this bill is about preserving and restoring the fundamental bedrock law on easements by necessity. The case was, the 2016 case was highly criticized by Harvard Law professor Joseph William Singer, who called the SJC's decision hostile to the easement by necessity theory. And it's been criticized significantly by other legal experts. We had an attorney from Northampton, Michael Pill, write an amicus brief on our behalf talking about how this is a fundamental easement that goes back centuries into early English law. So what we're asking for relief in this bill is for the legislature to acknowledge that these 5 Indian districts, lands that were initially created as part of the legislature's effort in the late 19th century, that all of these original Indian lots are entitled to easements by necessity. So thank you very much. I'd be glad to take any questions, but we respectfully request that this bill be reported favorably out of committee.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee members? All right. No, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Very informative. Next, we're going to ask Senator Becca Rausch to come up here to testify. And I will note she is also a member of the committee, but she is here to testify.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the noting that I have my attendance at the hearing as a member of the committee. I, too, am an attorney, and I remember that first-year property course, so the previous testimony is always interesting to me. Chair Garvely, always good to see you, my friend, and fellow members of the